Hi Angels. This will be Shadows of the Heart by the Angel Demon on AO3. Summary. In the aftermath of the Paranormal Liberation War, Izuku Midoriya struggles with guilt over Bakugou's near-death experience and his own perceived failures as a hero. When a group of villains attacks UA, Izuku and Bakugou are forced to fight side by side, their teamwork tested by the arrival of a mysterious new enemy. As they battle together, the two rivals confront their complex feelings of friendship and rivalry, finding common ground in their shared determination to become stronger. In the end, they realize that while their rivalry remains, their bond as comrades is stronger than ever. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the UA training grounds. The chill in the air seemed to grow stronger as the two boys stood there, breathing heavily in the aftermath of the battle. As the sirens wailed in the distance, heralding the arrival of pro-heroes and police to deal with the villains they had just taken down, Izuku Midoriya felt a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline coursing through him. His heart still pounded, his body aching from the fight. But above all, there was an unfamiliar warmth, one that came from knowing he and Bakugou had fought together, as equals. Bakugou wiped some dirt from his forehead, scowling at the unconscious figure at their feet. Damn cowards. Thought they could mess with us just because we've been through some shit. Izuku glanced at Bakugou out of the corner of his eye. You were amazing, Kaken. TCH, Bakugou crossed his arms. Don't go getting all sentimental on me, Deku. But despite the sharpness in his words, there was something softer in his tone. Something that told Izuku he wasn't the only one feeling the weight of what they'd just accomplished. For so long, their rivalry had been defined by conflict, by Bakugou's resentment and Izuku's desperate need for validation. But now, in the aftermath of everything, things were different. Izuku let out a breath, feeling the tension in his shoulders slowly begin to unwind. Kaken, back there, when you took that hit during the war. Bakugou immediately cut him off. We're not talking about that. But We're not. Bakugou's glare was fierce, but there was something beneath it, a flicker of vulnerability that Izuku had rarely seen. What happened, happened. I didn't do it for you, I did it because it's what I had to do. That's what being a hero means, right? Izuku stared at him for a long moment, the words sinking in. Bakugou had always been driven by his desire to be the best, to surpass All Might, to prove himself. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to it than that. Maybe Bakugou was starting to understand what All Might had always told them, that being a hero wasn't just about power or victory. It was about protecting people. Even the people you care about most. Yeah, Izuku said softly. That's what it means. For a while, neither of them spoke. They stood in the fading light, the only sounds coming from the distant sirens and the rustling of the trees in the breeze. It was a moment of peace in a world that had been anything but peaceful lately. I'm not done, Bakugou suddenly said, breaking the silence. Izuku blinked, confused. What do you mean? Bakugou clenched his fists, staring down at the ground. I'm not done with you, Deku. This fight we had today, it doesn't change anything. I'm still going to be the #1 hero. I'm still going to surpass you. Izuku couldn't help but smile. Some things never changed. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Kaken. But before Bakugou could respond, a voice interrupted them. Well, looks like the cavalry's arrived late, huh? Izuku and Bakugou both turned to see a group of pro-heroes approaching the scene, led by none other than Shota Aizawa, better known as Eraserhead. His tired eyes swept over the aftermath of the battle, taking in the unconscious villains, the damage to the training grounds, and the two exhausted boys standing amidst the chaos. Care to explain what happened here? Aizawa asked, raising an eyebrow. Bakugou rolled his eyes. What does it look like? We took care of some idiots who thought they could break into UA. Aizawa's gaze shifted to Izuku, who offered a more measured response. They attacked suddenly. I think it was a distraction, but we managed to stop them before they could do any real damage. Aizawa stared at them both for a moment, then sighed. You two should have called for backup. We didn't have time, Bakugou snapped. That's no excuse, Aizawa replied, his voice calm but firm. You could have been seriously hurt. Again. Izuku flinched at the reminder, but Bakugou just scowled. We handled it. Aizawa sighed again, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You're both too reckless for your own good. We'll talk about this later. For now, go get checked out by Recovery Girl. Izuku and Bakugou both nodded, though Bakugou looked like he was about to argue. Before he could, though, Aizawa turned away, motioning for the other pro-heroes to start securing the area and taking the villains into custody. As they began to walk back toward the main building, Izuku could feel the weight of the day catching up with him. His muscles ached, his head throbbed, and all he wanted to do was collapse into bed and sleep for a week. But there was something else, a quiet sense of satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he and Bakugou were truly on the same page. They'd fought side by side, not as rivals, but as partners. Hey, Deku, Bakugou said suddenly, his voice cutting through Izuku's thoughts. Izuku glanced over at him. Yeah? Bakugou's expression was unreadable, but his tone was softer than usual. Don't go thinking this means we're friends or anything. Izuku chuckled, a small smile tugging at his lips. I wouldn't dream of it. Bakugou scoffed, but there was no real heat behind it. They continued walking in silence, the night air cool against their skin. When they reached Recovery Girl's office, Bakugou grumbled about not needing to be healed, but he relented after a sharp look from the elderly hero. Izuku sat down, letting Recovery Girl fuss over his cuts and bruises as Bakugou leaned against the wall, arms crossed and glaring at nothing in particular. As Recovery Girl finished healing him, Izuku's mind wandered back to their earlier conversation on the rooftop. He thought about everything they'd been through, the fights, the arguments, the near-death experiences. And yet, here they were. Still standing. Still fighting. When Recovery Girl finished healing them both, she gave them a stern lecture about overexerting themselves and warned them to rest properly. Bakugou grumbled but nodded, while Izuku thanked her quietly. As they left the office, Izuku hesitated for a moment, then spoke. Kaken, about earlier, when you said you weren't done. Bakugou cut him off with a wave of his hand. I said I'm still gonna surpass you, and I meant it. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna leave you behind. Izuku blinked in surprise, his heart skipping a beat. Kaken. I'm still the best, Bakugou continued, his tone fierce. But I'm not an idiot. I know we've gotta work together to get stronger. So don't go screwing up and getting yourself killed, alright? Izuku couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. It wasn't an apology, Bakugou didn't do those, but it was the closest thing to one he'd ever get. And in its own way, it meant more than any apology ever could. I won't, Izuku promised, his voice steady. I'll keep getting stronger, too. Bakugou huffed, shoving his hands in his pockets as they started walking again. Damn right you will. I'm not gonna let you fall behind. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the weight of their words hanging in the air between them. It was strange, Izuku thought, how much had changed between them in such a short amount of time. For so long, their relationship had been defined by rivalry, by Bakugou's anger and Izuku's desperate need to prove himself. But now, standing here after everything they'd been through, it felt like they were finally starting to understand each other. As they reached the dorms, Bakugou paused, glancing over at Izuku. Get some rest, nerd. We've got training tomorrow. Izuku nodded, a small smile on his face. You too, Kaken. Bakugou snorted, but there was something almost fond in his expression as he turned and headed toward his room. Izuku watched him go, feeling a strange sense of contentment settle over him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Later that night, Izuku lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. His body was sore, his mind still buzzing with the day's events, but there was a quiet calm that he hadn't felt in a long time. Bakugou had always been a part of his life, in one way or another. First as a childhood friend, then as a rival. And now as something else. Not quite a friend, but no longer an enemy. Something in between. Something that felt like it was still evolving, still growing. Izuku smiled to himself, closing his eyes as he let sleep take him. He didn't know what the future held for them, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of it. Because no matter what came next, he knew one thing for sure, he and Bakugou would face it together. This is the end of Shadows of the Heart Be the Angel Demon on AO3. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestion, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to know when the next one is out. Bye angels.